welcome back to the Camp Chronicles podcast. Can you believe we're up to episode 5 already? I'm just loving every second of filming the podcast and us sitting and chatting and just talking all things camp. There's no topic, I believe, by the time it gets to camp that we won't have covered because we're talking about that much.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing an episode every single week, so I'm pretty sure we'll have covered nearly every topic possible by the time it gets to June. So we got a lot more under our belt for sure.
But if there is any topics, obviously, that you guys want us to discuss, just send us a message on Instagram, either directly or the Camp Chronicles page. But that does lead us on to today's episode, where we are both actually interviewers for our agencies. So we thought, because it's coming to that time now where, you know, a lot of people are having their agency interviews and then their camp interviews, we would give our top tips and tricks.
So it's actually I feel like it's come around so soon. Like realistically, I've only been back from camp and traveling for about 2 months now, and people are already getting placed at camps, aren't they? Like I love seeing on TikTok everyone being like, "Oh, this is my camp placement for 2025." Have you seen many of them yet?
I've seen quite a lot of them where it's like the slideshow of pictures where it's like the state and then the camp. Yeah, I love watching them. But we actually in our Facebook page now have, I'm pretty sure, like nearly 130 people in it.
Camps are really going through the hiring quick, and I mean when I got hired pretty early into the hiring season as well. I think I got hired about October, November sort of time, and I think it's good to try and get in there early because then it gives you plenty time to sort out all your visa and your documents and everything like that, doesn't it?
That's it. And also you've got to think like the sooner you apply and the sooner you're looking at camps, the more roles there's going to be at camps that you might want to go to. So I always say that to people when they're like, "Oh, I'm thinking about waiting to apply." I'm like, you can wait to apply because the deadline isn't until like next year. But in doing so, you're limiting your choice. There's less for you to pick from.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think there's a few hiring fairs this weekend as well, isn't there? Where a lot of people if you apply now, you can go to these hiring fairs and almost get instantly hired in person by specific camps. So it's definitely, if anybody is thinking of applying, now is a good time to do it. Give yourself plenty time to save money for traveling and going to camp and to get all those documents sorted. So not to be pushy, but if anyone wants to apply, do it now.
I know my agency's also doing like virtual fairs as well, where like loads of camps will sign up with us, and then on a specific day, the people that are like have gone through their interview and everything and are at the camp ready stage, they then join on to this waiting list, and then they kind of pick out the camps who have like different roles like available,
Yeah.
and then they'll be able to set up an interview. So it's like the in-person hire fair, except it's kind of over Zoom.
That's a good way to do it because I know the camp fairs, they are few and far between. But if you've got virtual ones as well, it's great. There's so many ways to get hired, isn't there?
So did you apply directly to your camp?
I obviously did my initial interview with AmeriCamp, the agency one, and then my application just went out into the portal for all the camps to view. And then Camp Echo was the first camp that put me on review, and I had my interview with them, and I was like, yeah, sounds good, perfect.
Yeah, I ended up applying directly to my camp. But I was also in the hiring pool as well, but I was kind of a little bit impatient, so I started reaching out to loads of different camps and then got an interview for my camp. So
Did you reject any camps? Did you get any kind of requests for interviews when you were put into the hiring pool?
I did, yes. It was a camp in San Francisco, and basically the way that they sold their camp to me was that you'd be living outdoors in a hammock with no running water, no electricity, and you would literally just be outdoors. And I was like, nope, no thank. I was like, cool that it's in San Francisco, but no
No.
thank you. I don't fancy getting eaten by a bear.
No, that is real rustic camping, isn't it? I don't think I could have done that. I could maybe do it for a week, but I don't think I'd be able to do that for a full session at all.
No, me either. Me either. And this was running, I think it was like 12 weeks, you know. It was like one of the long placements that you can get at a camp.
That's crazy. Well, it just goes to show that you don't always need to take the first one that jumps at you. If it's not the right camp for you, then definitely don't take it.
if you read like about a camp and you think, oh well, this is the only camp that's reached out to me and I've been in a hiring pool for quite a while now and it doesn't feel right for you, do not take it.
Yeah.
Trust your gut and just know that the right camp will come to you at the time when it's meant to.
Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, we should probably like circle back a little bit to like the actual interview process. So, you will do at least two interviews. You've got to do your interview with your agency first, which is like a visa requirement. They have to speak to you like in person slash over Zoom or whatever. And then obviously you will then do interviews with camps, but we both interview for our respective agencies. So I reckon a lot of the different agencies, there'll be certain questions that are very similar, and there might be some that each interviewer has that is a little bit different. But with myself, usually I would go in with the big one: why do you want to work at summer camp?
That's my main one too. That's the big question. I think
Yeah.
99% of the time you will get asked in an interview.
Yeah. And there's so many reasons that people want to work at camp, but at the same time, you've got to be kind of logical with the way you answer this. So if someone said to me they want to work at camp because they want to work in America, and that was the only reason that they could think of, or I want to work in America and I want to travel America, then it's not a red flag. Maybe say it's a beige flag, but it's definitely not a green flag. If that's one of the reasons, great. But realistically, one of the main reasons that you should want to work at camp is because you either enjoy working with kids or you want to work with kids in the future. And also, you are working on a cultural exchange visa. So you should want to experience the culture of America and also all the other staff that come from all over the world to work there.
No, I agree, and I think leading into like questions that we both kind of ask in our interview, I think one of the main ones for me I always ask is, what does a positive role model mean to you? Because in my eyes, like all I want to be is a positive role model to my kids
Mhm.
and be able to make a difference.
Mhm.
Because I think it's important to know what that means to someone, and it kind of leads into them kind of telling you what type of counselor they want to be.
Mm. That's another big one as well. I think it kind of gives you a bit more of an insight into their personality, like you were saying, what they think a good counselor would look like. I always kind of ask people like why should a camp hire you? And that kind of gives like the same vibe of realistically the answer that you should be expressing the qualities that you possess that would make you a good counselor, shouldn't you, really?
Yeah, definitely. On your camp interview, you're also interviewing them. So like
Yeah.
they'll have so many questions that they'll ask you, but you have to also, come prepared and ask them questions because in a sense you're also interviewing them.
Hmm. Yeah, you've got to kind of like be prepared, don't you? Because you know some camps have got much bigger online or social media presences than others. So for example, like your camp Tyler Hill has got a massive social media presence. If anybody's got an interview with Tyler Hill, they can go on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. There's so many people and videos and stuff that they can watch. I'm sure they've got like a massive website. Whereas, you might have an interview with like a much smaller camp and maybe you can't find anyone that's posted their experience online that's been there, and that their website might be very minimal and basic. So you should have an idea in your head of maybe like questioning their policies, like, oh, what's your time off policy? Kind of what are the living conditions? Like, do you live in the bunk with kids? Like, ask them their expectations and like all these different things that it'll also show the director or whoever's interviewing you that you're actually taking a strong interest in their camp as well.
I don't know about you, but just something that came to my mind is when you mentioned about social media presence, when somebody just says, "Oh, I've seen like the experience online and I want that experience." I think
Yeah.
you've got to want to make the experience for yourself. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind when people say that, but I
Mhm.
think you've got to kind of elaborate and be like, but I want to create my own experience and I can see that they've been a role model to their children and it's something that I really want to do and be able
Mhm.
to, you know, be that counsellor that them campers, when they become a counsellor, say to their campers, I once had this counsellor.
You've always got to just like elaborate that little bit more, don't you? And I mean, like, whoever interviews you will have experience. So, for example, if someone gives me quite like a blunt answer, like they might just be a little bit nervous. So, like, I'll always try and like dig a little bit more. So, if your interviewer does that, they're not trying to like attack you, they just want to know a bit more information. Because, I mean, once we've done the interview, we have to type up all the notes, and that's what gets sent off for camps to see, basically. So, the more information you provide your interviewer during the interview, the easier it'll be for them to write a glowing report about how you'd be an amazing counsellor. So yeah, just try and elaborate on things as much as possible, like you kind of said there. And I'm trying to think, like, other kind of the main bit, I guess, is you're going to be working with kids. If you've got experience working with kids, great, go into as much detail as you can. If you haven't worked with kids before, you might have done babysitting, or you might have younger siblings or cousins or anyone that you kind of like look after. Or even if you've got no experience at all, you should express an interest in working with kids. Because I know you said you didn't really have much experience working with kids, did you, before camp?
Not at all. So I done a little bit of coaching. I done a volunteering certificate qualification,
Hmm.
and then in college I was a part of the girls' soccer team.
Hmm.
I kind of used my coaching experiences from both of them. But apart from that, like I'm the youngest in my family,
Hmm.
so I never had like the opportunity to babysit or anything like that. In fact, I'd never really been around many children. I just
Yeah.
hadn't quite found the experiences to do it.
Hmm.
Whereas I saw obviously camp was the perfect experience for it. So going into the interviews, I was quite nervous because I only really had the like coaching background from when I was
Hmm.
younger myself. I just kind of just let them see my personality, let them see the type of person I am. I'm like,
Hmm.
I'd like to say I'm quite warm, I'm quite caring, you know. I want the kids to be able to have like a fun experience while also staying safe. Like, I just made sure my interviewers saw that of me,
Hmm.
and so that it kind of filled the hole for
Yeah.
the not having as much experience.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing though, as long as you can show that you're willing and like that's something that you want to do, then that's great. You don't have to have like loads and loads of experience. I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere, don't they? But if you can show that you are willing to work with kids, that kind of leads us into another like few questions that I would usually ask as well, is either if people have obviously worked with kids before, kind of how they would deal with situations, or obviously like yourself, even if you haven't got any experience working really with kids, how you would react in certain situations. I know a lot of the main ones that I'd usually ask would be, you know, if you've got a child in your bunk and they're crying and they're homesick, how would you deal with that? Or you might have one kid that's being totally excluded by the rest of the bunk. Again, how would you resolve that? Do you ask many sort of situational questions?
Very similar to that because having been a counsellor myself, I've dealt with like homesick campers, so I think it's
Mhm.
important for. I'm not necessarily expecting them to know exactly how to resolve a problem, but it's
Mhm.
just having them like thinking skills and thinking on your feet.
Mhm.
But I also I'm a big kind of believer that you almost learn as you go in them situations.
Mhm.
But I definitely ask, I'm trying to think of the question that I ask. I always say, have you ever had like a situation with a child where you know they've been difficult and how would you have resolved it? So it's kind of given
Mhm.
them a chance to say like the situation, how they
Mhm.
handled it and what the result was of it. And
Yeah.
then if I get the vibe that they haven't kind of worked with children a lot, I kind of switch the question around a little bit and I ask them how they've done it in like the workplace. So you
Yeah.
get to see that they have got the problem solving skills.
Hmm. It's all like transferable skills, really, because again, if you don't have much experience working with kids, or you've got loads of experience working with kids, but it might only be like 4 and below, which you're not really going to get 4 and below, very many 4 and below year olds at camp. It is the transferable skills that you've got working with them and thinking, okay, how can I apply them into the camp environment and being a camp counselor? So, like, I would always say things like teamwork, like even if you work at a restaurant and it's like busy, you know, you can say like, oh well, I worked cohesively with like the other like servers, with like the chefs, like making sure orders get there on time, like that's teamwork. Or things like adaptability, that's a big one at camp. I feel like camp things can change like that. You need to be adaptable. And even if you're like fresh out of college, fresh out of school, you could be like, oh well, I was doing this group project and, you know, like one person was sick on the day we were meant to present, so I had to jump in at the last minute and help present instead. Like literally you might think it's so tiny and irrelevant, but all those like little experiences kind of show your character, don't they?
Yeah, we're not expecting people to like relate every situation or every answer to working with children. We
Mhm.
want to hear about like your life experiences and your work experience and how you deal with situations in a workplace, or even like with your friends, for instance. Like, you know, if you're the type of friend where people come to you for advice, let us know that. And that shows that you've got empathy, that shows that you're a good
Yeah.
listener, that you've got an open ear. And I always say it's always important, especially when working with children, that just listening can be as just as
Mhm.
important as giving them advice that they need. Like just sitting there and saying, I'm here to listen.
Yeah, it's just like taking all those like little life experiences that you have and like applying them in camp. Another big question is obviously like, why should camp hire you? And I think like a good way to kind of answer this question is think about some of the qualities and the personality traits that you possess and how you think they would translate into being a good counselor. So you could say like, oh, you know, sometimes I can be shy, but I think I could relate to those quieter kids a little bit more. Or I'm like really caring and, you know, I'm like you were saying, I'm the one my friends always come to for advice. I'm always willing to listen. I love working part of a group. There's like so many qualities that you can have like that would make a good counselor. You've just kind of got to sell yourself, don't you?
That's literally it. Like I said, be yourself. That's all that matters. As long as you show them your personality, you will end up at the right camp for you.
Mhm.
And that's just so important. Just be yourself. That's like my biggest advice.
I A lot of people I think you probably have to be like this super outgoing, like crazy bubbly person to work at a camp. And whilst yes, some people are like that, not everybody is. And there genuinely is a place at camp for everyone. So like there's so many different people that work at camp and like they need the variety of people. If everybody that worked there was like go 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 mental running around crazy all the time, it would be chaotic because not all the kids are like that. You need sometimes, you know, the fun counselors and like you can be chaotic and mad and like the kids will have a good time playing with you, but then also sometimes you might have like the quieter kids in the bunk that just want to like sit and read or like do arts and crafts quietly. It's nice to also have some like slightly quieter counselors that can sit and like chill and be calm with those kids. Or you can just wear both hats and you can be crazy one second and nice and calm and gentle the next.
You've just got to have that balance, don't you? And I think that's what makes like the teamwork work at camp, is having the
Mhm.
balance of having the outgoing crazy personalities, having the more chilled personalities. I know across my division, there's so many different personalities. We're very fortunate this summer to have had, I would probably say, a counsellor for every personality. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because, like you said, I can be that crazy, jumping up and down, running around crazy in circles. I can be that counsellor, but also other times I can be like that calm presence. And
And it's just trying to like get your point across and like portray yourself like in that light. So when you are doing your interviews, like if you know that you can be all these different types of people, like tell your interviewer that, like, and then they'll write that up and the camps will read that and they'll be like, oh, this looks like a great person to hire. Another thing as well, rather than just like all obviously personality, why you want to work at camp, etc., is thinking about like roles at camp. So when you're doing your interview with your agency, like when I do it, I in my head can kind of generate a picture of, oh, I think this person would be best suited to this role. Or, you know, when I initially got hired, I got hired as a basketball counselor. Obviously, that never happened because of COVID, but that was because I like have quite a lot of experience coaching basketball. I have my level 2 basketball coaching qualification, and I'd coached like an under 14s girls national league team for a few years. I'd like volunteered when I was younger. So if you're in like a similar position with like a different sport or a different skill or activity, um kind of remember when you're talking to your interviewer, like go into every single little detail that you can. I know obviously you got hired as a volleyball coach with no volleyball real experience, but you
I
could be
think,
hired as anything.
but let us know what level you're at. Let us know if you're beginner. Let us know if you're intermediate. Let us know if you're
Mhm.
advanced. Let us know qualifications. If you've got experience teaching kids this, or if
Mhm.
you've got experience at a club where you might not necessarily be teaching at the club, but if you would be comfortable to teach, let us know all of that information, because like you said earlier on, the more you tell us, the better it is for when we type up the interview notes, because we then type them interview notes up, and alongside your camp resume, there's also all of the information that we've got down from the interview.
Mhm.
So tell us everything. Even if you think the smallest detail isn't important, I can guarantee it will be important somewhere in your application.
Yeah, because even like if it's maybe a hobby and not necessarily something that you're super skilled at or you just enjoy doing, like it could be, I don't know, for example, you like to go swimming. You've not necessarily done like your swimming badges and certificates, you're not looking to be a lifeguard, but you like to go swimming, and when you're on holiday, you're trying to help teach your little siblings to do this. Like every single bit of detail you can give us, it just makes it so much easier, doesn't it?
I think if you enjoy something and it's something you might have been passionate about as a kid, or you just enjoy it as a hobby, like we said,
Hmm.
put that down. Camps are just looking for somebody who's passionate in something and who's
Hmm.
willing to put themselves out there.
There's also so many skills that you can choose to put down. Like obviously you've got all the stereotypical sports, um, but then you've got things that are kind of like harder to come by in terms of like horse riding. I know a lot of camps, like my camp has horses, so like people that can care for horses, or we've got like the animal area, like at nature, like even if you like lived on a farm and you can show like I've worked with animals, like those are like all like relevant skills. Like they might seem random, but they are relevant to camps. There's so many different activities that you can do. Maybe the last kind of thing really is to ask your interviewer questions as well, I would suggest, because it just shows that you've thought about the kind of process and you've thought about what camp is and how camps can differ. I know like when I do my interviews, if someone says to me like, oh well, like how was your experience working in your role, then it shows like, oh, they've thought about the different roles at camp, they're not just applying and just they're thinking about it and processing it, which is really nice as well, I think.
No, I think it is important to go into it like with questions, and if it's your agency interview, I can guarantee the person on the other side of the phone could talk about camp for all day long. So I say no question is a stupid question. Ask
Mhm.
it, and they'll probably have a story to tell for you. And the same with your camp interviews. The person on the other side of the phone also works as, at the summer camp all year round. So they clearly love it and they clearly have a passion for it. So even like you could ask them, how did you start out at camp? What role
Yeah.
were you when you started at camp? Like questions like that, and it just shows like you're actually interested in the camp and you want to know how things run, and kind of like you want to get to know the people that work there.
Yeah, I think that is really important. One last thing, actually, I feel like this is probably like the last thing, is when you are at the interview, well, when you have your interview, even if it's like over Zoom, which majority of interviews are for people, like try and look presentable.
Yes.
And I don't mean you have to be like dolled up, makeup, get a fresh trim or anything like that, but I mean kind of sit somewhere where it's not like a really maybe chaotic background, or be somewhere where it's quiet. We don't want to see like that your mom's sat on the corner of your bed and she's like in listening to the interview trying to whisper answers to questions to you. Your mom's not going to be at camp with you. So like little things like that as well, and smiling during the interview. If someone's sitting there like all upset, it doesn't give a good impression, does it?
That's you've just said that, and I've just literally transported myself all the way back to orientation this year when one of our first full group leader meetings, and
Mhm.
when he was talking to us, and she was saying she has this saying where it's apples up. Just
Mhm.
just always think about your facial expressions, because I've got a bad habit of, I could be completely like interested in everything you're saying, but
Mhm.
sometimes my face is just like this. I've just got no facial expression. Like,
Yeah.
so it's just something that she said is apples up, always just be smiling and look engaged in the conversation. So having a smile on your face and, being interested in what the other person has to say is so important on your interviews, and present yourself well, like you said. Wear, a nice, even if it's just a nice sweatshirt. I'm not saying go on with like a tie and shirt on or like a blouse. Do you know what I mean? But just present yourself nice, and just think to yourself, like, you could be on the other end of the phone call in a year's time, in 2 years' time, interviewing people. So how would you want people to present themselves if you were the interviewer?
Yeah. And I think it can be quite daunting doing the interviews because it is a job at the end of the day. Like, it is a job interview. It will obviously be a little bit more relaxed and like a chat than probably if you were going for some super senior corporate role or something like that. Um, but it's still a job at the end of the day, so it should be somewhat professional. Don't be effing and blinding in the interview, or asking your interviewer, so, oh, what's the rules on drinking at camp? I'm not allowed to drink. That's a red flag, actually, isn't it?
That's a big red flag. When somebody only asks about like days off and social side of things and the travel side of things, like,
Mhm.
they're all great questions to ask, but just make sure they're not the only things you ask about. Make
Mhm.
sure you're like involving like your experience more so around the kids. And like, you made such a good point earlier on about the fact that it is a cultural exchange visa.
Mhm.
It's not a work holiday visa, it's a cultural exchange visa, and you are there to get to experience another culture. And you'll probably at camp come across several different cultures, but
Yeah.
just make sure the social aspect of things aren't at like the forefront of your interview questions that you ask whoever you're
Mhm.
interviewing.
Speaking of culture, actually, for any like international staff members, one of the requirements is obviously that you can speak English. Obviously, you go into a camp in America, most of the kids are going to speak English. I'm trying to think how to phrase it. I know during orientation, like, there's always somewhat of a talk about English is the language that we use at camp. You know, things could so easily get like mistranslated, but English will be the language that you need to speak at camp. So when you are interviewing, if English isn't your first language, try and speak as clearly as possible. If you need someone to repeat something, like, you can ask your interviewer to repeat the question if you don't understand, but definitely, definitely be aware that you will be speaking English at camp for the most part.
And I think we've said the last thing about the four last things. So I think, to wrap it up, I would say that my top tips are, and it's something that I done on my agency interview and my camp interview, and it's got me to where I am now. Be yourself, show them your personality, show
Mhm.
them how passionate you are about being a camp counselor. And for me, if you want to change kids' lives and you want to be that positive role model that you may have wished you had as a kid, or maybe you did have as a kid, then being a counselor is the perfect role for you. So just go for it. Be yourself and just go for it. And I promise you, you won't regret it.
Yeah. Again, like I've said final point a million times, but this will be my closing statement as well, is do your research into not necessarily a camp, but just camp in general. Understand the program, understand kind of what it's about, so that when you go into your interview, you're prepared, you can answer questions well, and you know exactly what the interviewer is looking for. You can kind of, sell yourself and your personality, like you were saying, be yourself and know what they're looking for and how you can relate your experiences to working in the camp environment. Yeah.
So we hope that this episode has kind of opened your eyes into the whole process and the camp interviews and the agency interviews. And if there genuinely are any questions at all that you have, or you just want some advice about the whole process, just drop us a message. And, you know, both of us are constantly looking at the Camp Chronicles Instagram page and TikTok page. So if you send a message on there, you're guaranteed to get a response from one of us. Or if you want to message us privately, just do it, because at the end of the day, we just are here to make sure that you guys get to have the smoothest process through this whole application, and we just want you to end up at the camp that's right for you.
Definitely. And if anyone has their interview soon, or even if it's like 4 months in the future when you're listening to this and you finally decide that you want to apply, then good luck with your interviews and have an amazing summer.
Yeah, good luck. You never know, it might be one of us on the other end of the call.
That would be great. That would be funny.
And on that note, we'll see you in next week's episode.